Michael Sullivan stared at the cream envelope on his kitchen table, Claire's familiar handwriting sending a jolt through his weathered hands. Afternoon light streamed through faded curtains, casting long shadows across the oak surface where countless family dinners had once been shared. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the musty photo albums stacked nearby. His fingers trembled as he slid out the wedding invitation, Claire's handwritten note revealing itself. Thought you might want to see what real success looks like. His vision blurred, a single tear splashing onto the glossy card. The grandfather clock's steady ticking seemed to mock his suddenly unsteady breath. Ever had someone from your past reach out just to remind you of your failures? Share your story below, like if this stings, and follow to see how Michael handles this moment of betrayal. His jaw tightened as he placed the invitation beside a framed photo of happier times, determination slowly replacing the hurt in his eyes. Michael Sullivan stared at the cream envelope on his desk, Claire's familiar handwriting sending a jolt through his weathered hands. Afternoon sunlight filtered through half-drawn curtains, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor of his modest living room. The grandfather clock, his father's legacy, ticked steadily in the corner, marking time that suddenly seemed to stand still. His fingers trembled slightly as he slid out the wedding invitation, the glossy card catching the light. Then he saw it, Claire's handwritten note at the bottom. Thought you might want to see what real success looks like. His vision blurred, a single tear forming before he could catch it. After all this time, he whispered, his voice cracking in the empty room. The tear splashed onto the invitation, creating a small dark circle on the expensive paper. Michael set his coffee down untouched, the lump in his throat making it impossible to swallow. The bitter aroma that usually comforted him now mixed with the salt of tears, creating a sensory memory he knew would linger. His gaze drifted to the family photo on the side table. Claire and him in happier times, before she'd dismissed his business ideas as childish dreams. Before she'd told him he'd never amount to anything worth staying for. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Not fair. Not after everything. Michael's shoulders slumped as he sank deeper into his worn leather armchair, the one Claire had always said they needed to replace. A quiet sob escaped, despite his efforts to maintain composure. In this room where he'd spent countless evenings refining his tech project, the mockery cut especially deep. His gaze shifted to the prototype on his desk, the irony bitter enough to taste. The very project she'd laughed at was days away from a $50 million deal. Too late for their marriage, but perhaps just in time for something else. Michael gently placed the invitation beside the family photo, creating an unintended tableau of past and present. As he wiped away the tear track from his lined face, he noticed something odd about the invitation. A slight smudge in the corner of Claire's handwriting, barely perceptible but catching his engineer's eye. The familiar analytical part of his mind stirred to life beneath the hurt. Why now? Why invite him at all? The mockery seemed excessive, even for Claire. The phone's sudden ring startled him from his thoughts. Thomas, his business partner, calling about tomorrow's investor meeting. Michael straightened his posture instinctively, even alone in his living room. He hesitated, glancing once more at the invitation before reaching for the phone. Whatever game Claire was playing, he wasn't the same man she'd left behind. Whether he would attend this wedding was a question for another moment. For now, there was work to be done. Michael cleared his throat before answering the phone, hoping Thomas wouldn't detect the emotion still raw in his voice. Sullivan here. Michael, it's happening! Thomas's excitement crackled through the line. The final investor just confirmed. We've got the full $50 million. The deal's set for tomorrow at 3. Michael's gaze fixed on Claire's invitation while Thomas spoke, the bitter irony of the timing not lost on him. His free hand moved to touch the glossy card, fingertips tracing the edge where her handwriting mocked his supposed failure. "That's excellent news," he managed, his voice steadying with each word. "Any changes to the terms we discussed?" The conversation shifted to business details, percentages, contract clauses, future projections, as Michael's posture gradually straightened in his chair. With each point of discussion, he felt his professional confidence returning, pushing back against the personal wound Claire had reopened. A fleeting memory surfaced, Claire sitting across the kitchen table 3 years ago, rolling her eyes as he explained this very project. "Another pipe dream, Michael. When will you accept your limitations and stop chasing fantasies?" Her dismissal had stung then. Now, it served as unexpected fuel. Thomas continued outlining tomorrow's schedule, unaware of the emotional current running beneath Michael's measured responses. Michael's knuckles whitened as his grip on the phone tightened, a physical manifestation of his determination. "I've got the presentation files ready," Michael said, glancing at his computer monitors where complex technical diagrams displayed the innovation Claire had deemed worthless. "We'll need the conference room set up by 2 for final preparations." As the call progressed, a subtle change occurred. A slight smile appeared, despite the lingering tear track on Michael's cheek. 3 years of persistence, of believing in himself when others hadn't, was culminating in validation. "This is just the beginning," Thomas said before ending the call. "Your vision was right all along." After hanging up, Michael sat in momentary silence, the grandfather clock's steady ticking providing counterpoint to his thoughts. The contrast between professional triumph and personal pain created an emotional dissonance he hadn't anticipated facing today. He picked up Claire's invitation again, studying it more carefully. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, just 3 days after their deal signing. The timing couldn't be more perfect if he'd planned it himself. Michael opened his desk drawer and placed the invitation inside rather than trashing it. "Maybe I should attend after all," he murmured to the empty room, the first glimmer of potential vindication replacing hurt in his eyes. Tomorrow he would become the success Claire never believed he could be. What he might do with that success afterward remained an open question, one he wasn't quite ready to answer yet. The boardroom hummed with anticipation. Michael adjusted his tie, fingers steady despite the emotional turbulence of the past 24 hours. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, a vista of possibilities he'd never stopped believing in, even when Claire had. "All set?" Thomas asked quietly, arranging the final contract copies on the gleaming mahogany table. Michael nodded, the weight of Claire's wedding invitation in his inner jacket pocket a strange counterbalance to the moment. He'd brought it deliberately, though he couldn't fully articulate why. The investors filed in, 3 venture capitalists whose initial skepticism had gradually transformed into enthusiasm over months of presentations and prototypes. Michael greeted each with a firm handshake, his demeanor measured compared to Thomas's barely contained excitement. "Gentlemen," Michael began once everyone was seated, "today represents the culmination of 3 years' work, but more importantly, the beginning of what comes next." The presentation flowed smoothly, market projections, technical specifications, implementation timelines. Michael delivered each point with the quiet authority that had become his professional signature, a stark contrast to the man who'd sat slumped in his armchair yesterday, wounded by Claire's mockery. When the lead investor slid the final contract across the table, Michael uncapped his pen with deliberate calm. The room fell silent as he signed his name, the scratch of pen on paper marking a defining moment. "Congratulations, Mr. Sullivan," the investor said, extending his hand. "We believe this technology will transform the industry. Your persistence has paid off. Your persistence has paid off." The phrase echoed in Michael's mind as champagne corks popped and congratulations circulated. Claire's voice intruded. "You're wasting your time on this, Michael. You'll never amount to anything significant." How wrong she had been. While others celebrated, Michael stepped onto the small balcony adjoining the boardroom, needing a moment alone. The afternoon sun warmed his face as he checked his phone. 3 news alerts already announcing the deal. His company's value had tripled overnight. By tomorrow, business publications would feature his success prominently. His fingers brushed against Claire's invitation through his jacket. Would she see the news before her wedding? The question triggered not malice, but a quiet curiosity about fate's peculiar timing. In the reflection of the window glass, Michael studied his own face, lined by years and challenges, yet somehow lighter now. The hurt from yesterday hadn't vanished, but it had transformed into something else. Resolution. He would attend the wedding, not for revenge or gloating, but for a quiet reclamation of dignity. Claire had deemed him a failure and moved on to someone she considered successful. Now he would simply show up as himself, the man who had become successful on his own terms through perseverance she hadn't valued. Michael rejoined the celebration inside, accepting a glass of champagne with a reserved smile. Tomorrow would bring media interviews and industry recognition. Saturday would bring a different kind of recognition altogether. Both, in their way, represented closing chapters that needed proper endings before new ones could begin. Michael spread the financial newspaper across his kitchen table, his own face looking back at him from beneath the headline, "Sullivan secures $50 million deal. Tech innovation poised to reshape market." His coffee steamed beside the paper, the morning light creating a surreal glow around this tangible evidence of his success. 3 other business publications had run similar stories. His phone had been buzzing since dawn with congratulatory messages from colleagues and industry contacts. Michael had responded to each with characteristic brevity, neither dismissing the achievement nor indulging in excessive celebration. He folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside. Today was Friday, one day before Claire's wedding to David Richardson, the wealthy investor she'd deemed more worthy of her future than Michael had been. In his bedroom, Michael opened his closet and removed the garment bag containing his newest suit, charcoal gray Italian wool with subtle blue undertones, purchased after the initial investor meetings but never worn. He laid it on the bed, a stark contrast to his otherwise modest furnishings. As he removed the protective plastic, a memory surfaced, Claire sighing as she straightened his tie before a business dinner. "You never quite get it right, do you?" she'd said, her tone making it clear the criticism extended beyond his attire. The recollection no longer stung as it once had. Michael showered and dressed with methodical care, each movement deliberate. The suit fit perfectly, emphasizing his still trim physique, the silver at his temples adding distinction rather than age. Standing before the mirror, he practiced neutral expressions, polite acknowledgement, mild interest, quiet confidence, preparing for every potential scenario tomorrow might bring. "What will you say when you see her?" he asked his reflection, rehearsing this private conversation as thoroughly as any business presentation. He considered several responses, discarding each as either too revealing or unnecessarily cruel. Finally, he settled on something simple. "Congratulations, Claire. I wish you both well." The words themselves weren't important. His presence would communicate everything necessary. His phone chimed with a text from the car service he'd arranged. Confirmation for tomorrow. Pick up at 1:30 p.m. for 3 p.m. event at Westbrook Gardens. Driver, Marcus. Michael replied with a brief confirmation, then hesitated, Claire's invitation still on his dresser beside his wallet and keys. He picked it up, reading her mocking note once more before placing it in his inner suit pocket. A reminder of purpose, a talisman of sorts. The weight of it against his chest prompted a moment of reflection. Was he making this decision for the right reasons? Was it worth disturbing his newfound peace to step back into Claire's orbit, even briefly? He moved to his window, watching people on the street below going about their Friday routines. His own life had found a steady rhythm in the years since the divorce, work that fulfilled him, a home that, while modest, was entirely his own. Tomorrow would disrupt that rhythm deliberately. His phone rang again, a business reporter requesting an interview about the deal. Michael straightened his shoulders before answering, voice calm and professional. This was the person he had become, measured, deliberate, successful on his own terms. As he scheduled the interview for Monday, Michael took a deep breath, decision fully crystallized. Tomorrow he would attend Claire's wedding, not as the failed husband she had discarded, but as Michael Sullivan, CEO, a man who had built something meaningful from the very dreams she had mocked. The car would arrive at 1:30. He would be ready. His phone buzzed once more, a text from an unknown number. "Heard you're attending tomorrow. She doesn't know yet about your success." Michael stared at the message, wondering who among Claire's circle was aware of both his invitation and his recent deal. The mysterious text added another layer to tomorrow's scenario, a variable he hadn't anticipated. With deliberate movements, he put the phone away without responding. Whoever had sent the message, their purpose didn't change his. Tomorrow would unfold as it would, with or without Claire's foreknowledge. He was, at last, ready either way. The Westbrook Gardens estate sprawled across manicured acres, its limestone facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Michael's car pulled up to the circular drive where attendants directed a steady stream of luxury vehicles. Crystal chandeliers were visible through tall windows, flowers worth thousands adorned every entrance, and string quartet music drifted through the air, all signaling a celebration of wealth rather than love. "Quite the display," Michael murmured to himself as the driver opened his door. He straightened his tie, buttoned his jacket, and approached the entrance with measured steps. A young usher consulted his guest list, eyes widening slightly in recognition. "Mr. Sullivan, Michael Sullivan, the CEO." Michael nodded, accepting his place card with a polite smile. The usher leaned toward a colleague, whispering something that caused both to glance back at Michael with undisguised interest. The first ripple of awareness had begun. Inside, the ceremony space was a cathedral of ostentation. White roses cascaded from ceiling to floor, gold-leafed chairs lined a marble aisle, and enormous crystal sculptures caught and fractured light into rainbow patterns. At least 200 guests mingled, their combined net worth likely rivaling the GDP of a small nation. Michael chose a seat in the middle section, neither hiding nor showcasing himself. As he settled in, he noticed heads turning in his direction, murmurs following in his wake. Business associates of David Richardson recognized him. Several nodded acknowledgement, confusion evident in their expressions. What was Claire's ex-husband, now a celebrated tech CEO, doing at her wedding to one of their colleagues? The string quartet transitioned to the traditional wedding march. Guests rose as the processional began. Michael stood with them, his posture relaxed yet dignified. David Richardson appeared at the altar, silver-haired, expensively tailored, confident in the way of men accustomed to deference. His smile faltered briefly as he scanned the audience, his gaze pausing on Michael before moving on, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. Then Claire appeared at the entrance, radiant in designer white, her smile practiced and perfect. She processed slowly down the aisle, accepting admiration as her due. Her eyes swept the crowd periodically, maintaining the illusion of connection with her guests. Midway through her vows, Claire's gaze drifted across the audience again, and froze when she spotted Michael. Her voice faltered mid-sentence, color draining visibly from her face. The champagne glass in the hand of her maid of honor trembled slightly in the sudden silence. I do, Claire managed, recovering with visible effort, though her eyes kept darting back to Michael throughout the remainder of the ceremony. David noticed her distraction, following her line of sight until he, too, realized Michael's presence. His arm tightened possessively around Claire's waist as they recessed down the aisle, his smile now distinctly strained. At the reception, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. Guests began gravitating toward Michael, business associates eager to discuss his recent success. Each time Claire looked in his direction, another cluster of people surrounded him, people who should have been celebrating her day, but were instead drawn to her ex-husband's unexpected new status. "Sullivan, remarkable timing on that deal," said William Porter, a venture capitalist who had backed David's company for years. "The applications could revolutionize several industries." Michael responded with measured enthusiasm, neither downplaying his achievement nor flaunting it. He hadn't sought these conversations, but neither did he avoid them. Claire's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips as she watched from across the room, her carefully constructed celebration slowly recentering around the man she had dismissed as a failure. When she finally approached, her smile was brittle, her knuckles white around her glass stem. "Michael." "What a surprise." Her voice strained for lightness. "I didn't expect you to actually come." "Congratulations, Claire," he replied simply, his voice steady. "I wish you both well." Before she could respond, David appeared at her side, his arm sliding around her waist with deliberate possessiveness. "Sullivan," he acknowledged tightly. "Quite the splash you're making in the market these days." "Just the beginning," Michael responded with a slight nod. "Years of work finally coming to fruition. Has someone who once dismissed you had to face your success? Share below, like if you felt that sweet vindication, and follow to see Claire's full reaction when she realizes what she threw away." As the conversation stalled in uncomfortable silence, David's business partner approached, touching Michael's elbow with unexpected familiarity. "Mr. Sullivan, we should talk about Richardson Industries and your recent acquisition." "Perhaps we could schedule a meeting next week." Claire's face registered the implications immediately. Her new husband's company intersecting with her ex-husband's rising influence. The perfectly orchestrated wedding day she had planned, designed to showcase her triumphant new life, had transformed into something entirely different. Michael accepted a fresh glass of champagne from a passing waiter, his quiet dignity a stark contrast to Claire's increasingly flustered attempts to reclaim attention. The tables had turned without him having to say a word. As he sipped his champagne, Michael felt no vindictive pleasure, only a peculiar sense of closure. Claire had defined success by wealth and status, choosing her path accordingly. He had defined it by perseverance and integrity, finding his own way forward. Both had gotten exactly what they had valued most. 1 month after the wedding, David Richardson stared at the financial reports spread across his home office desk, his expression darkening with each page he turned. The third quarter projections showed a 30% decline in revenue, with key clients migrating to newer technologies, specifically the innovations Michael Sullivan's company had brought to market. The desk lamp cast harsh shadows across David's face as he loosened his silk tie, a gesture that had become habitual in recent weeks. He pinched the bridge of his nose, the expensive watch on his wrist catching the light as he moved, a Patek Philippe that suddenly felt like a relic of more certain times. The door opened quietly as Claire entered, her designer loungewear a casual approximation of elegance. She'd been carefully monitoring David's mood since returning from their truncated honeymoon in the Maldives, cut short by urgent business concerns. "Still working?" she asked, her voice carefully modulated to show interest without pressure. David looked up, his expression tightening. "Sullivan's company took the Westfield contract today. That's the third major client we've lost this month." Claire's hand moved unconsciously to the diamond necklace at her throat, a nervous gesture she'd developed since the wedding. "I don't understand how he's doing this. His ideas never seemed practical." "Apparently the market disagrees," David replied dryly, pushing a business journal toward her. Michael's company featured prominently in an article titled "Innovation Leaders Reshaping Industry Standards." Claire picked up the magazine, studying Michael's professional headshot. The photographer had captured something she hadn't noticed at the wedding, a quiet confidence that made him almost unrecognizable from the husband she'd dismissed. "Is it deliberate?" she asked softly. "Is he targeting your company specifically?" David laughed without humor. "That would make this easier, wouldn't it?" "No, Claire, he's not targeting me. He's simply better positioned for where the market is heading. We're becoming obsolete while Sullivan Innovations is becoming essential." The wedding photo on David's credenza seemed to watch them accusingly. Claire, radiant in white, David distinguished in black, both smiling with the certainty of people who believed their futures secure. When Claire had arranged for Michael to receive an invitation, it had been a calculated display of her triumph. The memory now tasted like ash. Later that evening, after David had retreated to his study with a tumbler of scotch, Claire sat alone in their massive living room, laptop open to research she'd been conducting privately. Pages of articles about Michael's company filled her screen. Technology explanations she struggled to understand, financial analyses showing meteoric growth, profiles of the man she had once dismissed. One video interview particularly captured her attention. Michael sat across from a business reporter discussing his company's philosophy. "Success isn't about overnight miracles," he said on screen. "It's about perseverance through rejection, believing in your vision when others don't see it. Some of my best ideas were initially dismissed by people who should have believed in me." Claire closed the laptop sharply, his words cutting too close to home. The marble fireplace remained cold and unused, the expensive art on the walls suddenly seeming hollow rather than impressive. The house, like her marriage, had been chosen for appearance rather than substance. Morning brought another financial setback. Over breakfast, David announced that investors were pulling out of his newest venture. 3 years of work, he said bitterly, and they're walking away because Sullivan's approach makes ours look outdated. "Can't you adapt?" Claire suggested. "Incorporate some of his innovations?" David's laugh was harsh. "That's not how intellectual property works, Claire. He holds the patents. We'd need his cooperation to license the technology." A sudden thought occurred to her, terrible and tempting simultaneously. What if I talked to him? We were married for 15 years. Perhaps he would be willing to discuss a partnership. David stared at her for a long moment, desperation warring with pride on his face. Finally, he nodded. Set up a meeting. But don't expect charity from a man whose success you mocked at our wedding. Claire winced at his accuracy. She hadn't told David about the note she'd written on Michael's invitation, but he'd clearly understood the dynamics at play. That afternoon, she researched Michael's company headquarters, surprised to discover the impressive downtown building bearing his name. As she noted his office phone number, a news alert appeared on her screen. Richardson Industries stock falls 40% amid bankruptcy rumors. Claire's hand trembled as she reached for her phone. The life she had chosen for its apparent security was crumbling around her. Meanwhile, the man she had left behind had built something enduring from the very ideas she had dismissed. She would need to tread carefully. Michael had no reason to help her, or David. But perhaps he would listen, for old time's sake. Perhaps he still harbored enough feelings to be manipulated by them. With deliberate movements, she dialed his office number, rehearsing her most charming voice, the one that had once convinced Michael of so many things. "Sullivan Innovations," a receptionist answered. "How may I direct your call?" "This is Claire Richardson," she said, forcing confidence into her voice. "I'd like to speak with Michael Sullivan, please. Tell him it's about a potential business opportunity." As she waited on hold, Claire glanced at her wedding photo, David's confident smile now seeming like a relic from another lifetime. She had chosen security and status only to watch both dissolve like morning mist. The question now was whether Michael would even take her call, and what she would say if he did. Chapter 7. The Attempt. Claire Richardson stepped into the sleek lobby of Sullivan Innovations, her designer heels clicking against polished marble. The receptionist's cool gaze assessed her expensive outfit, perfectly styled hair, and the diamond jewelry that had become her armor. "Mrs. Richardson to see Mr. Sullivan," Claire announced, infusing her voice with the confidence she no longer felt. "Do you have an appointment?" The young woman's professional tone revealed nothing. "No, but he'll want to see me." Claire smiled her most charming smile. "We're old friends." The receptionist made a call, speaking too quietly for Claire to hear. After a brief exchange, she looked up with mild surprise. "Mr. Sullivan can give you 15 minutes between meetings. 12th floor. The elevator requires keycard access. I'll escort you." The executive floor radiated understated success. Modern artwork on walls, glass-enclosed conference rooms where teams collaborated, and a quiet energy Claire hadn't expected. Michael's assistant, a composed woman in her 50s, greeted her with professional detachment. "He'll be with you shortly, Mrs. Richardson. May I offer you water while you wait?" Claire declined, noting the subtle emphasis on her married name. She adjusted her bracelet nervously, rehearsing opening lines in her mind. When the office door finally opened, she rose with practiced grace. Michael stood in the doorway, his expression neutral but evaluating. He wore a tailored navy suit that fit his still trim frame perfectly, looking more distinguished than she remembered from the wedding. "Claire," he acknowledged, gesturing toward his office. "This is unexpected." The corner office was impressive without being ostentatious. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city, modern furniture balanced with traditional elements, and a wall displaying patents and awards. A framed photo sat on his desk, though Claire couldn't see who it featured. "Thank you for seeing me," she began, taking the visitor's chair he indicated. "You've built quite a company here. What can I do for you, Claire?" Michael remained standing, hands in pockets, bypassing small talk entirely. Claire adjusted her approach, recognizing the need for directness. "I've been following your success." The technology you've developed is revolutionary, exactly what you always said it could be. She offered a rueful smile. You were right all along. Michael's expression remained impassive. I appreciate the acknowledgement, but I doubt you came here to congratulate me on being right. No, Claire admitted, leaning forward slightly. I came because I believe there's a potential business opportunity that could benefit us both. She paused, choosing her words carefully. David's company has an established distribution network that could help scale your innovations faster. Michael raised an eyebrow, the only indication he was surprised by her directness. Richardson Industries is facing bankruptcy, according to the financial press. Not exactly an attractive partnership prospect. Claire flinched at his bluntness, but recovered quickly. Those reports are exaggerated. David's company is going through a transition, yes, but with the right technology partnership. Why did you invite me to your wedding, Claire? Michael interrupted, his voice calm but penetrating. The abrupt change of subject caught her off guard. I thought you should see, she faltered. That you had chosen correctly? He finished for her. That David represented the success you thought I'd never achieve? Claire's cheeks flushed. She stood, moving closer to him, shifting tactics. We all make mistakes, Michael. I judged you unfairly. I judged everything unfairly. She touched his arm lightly, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Looking back, I realize what we had was special. Michael glanced at her hand on his arm, then stepped back slightly, creating distance. What exactly are you proposing, Claire? A business partnership between my company and David's? Or something else? The directness of his question made Claire pause. She had come prepared to leverage whatever lingering feelings he might have to blur the lines between personal and professional if necessary. David knew this, had tacitly approved it in his desperation. I'm suggesting we explore possibilities, she said, moving closer again. We have history, Michael. 15 years together means something, doesn't it? We understood each other once. Did we? His voice remained measured. I don't think you ever understood what mattered to me. Claire pressed forward, sensing resistance, but committed to her purpose. People change. I've changed. Seeing what you've built has made me reevaluate everything. She met his eyes directly. David and I, it's not what I thought it would be. For a moment, silence filled the office. Claire felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he still harbored feelings that could be manipulated despite everything. Michael finally moved to his desk, glancing briefly at the framed photo before turning back to face her. Why would I help the man who's with the woman who called me a failure? Have you ever had to face someone who only valued you when they needed something? Comment your experience, like if you stood your ground, and follow to see Michael's final response to Claire's desperate plea. The directness of his question left Claire momentarily speechless. That was before I became successful, he finished. That's the problem, Claire. You only see value in what benefits you. His tone wasn't angry. If anything, it contained a hint of pity. You didn't believe in me when it mattered. Now you're here because you need something. Claire abandoned pretense, desperation breaking through her carefully constructed facade. David's company is collapsing. Everything we have is tied to it. Her voice cracked slightly. I don't know what we'll do. Michael studied her, his expression softening slightly, though not in the way she had hoped. There are excellent financial advisors who specialize in corporate restructuring. I can have my assistant provide some references. That's not what I'm asking for, Claire said, frustration edging into her voice. I know, Michael replied simply, but it's what I'm offering. Claire felt control of the situation slipping away. This wasn't the Michael she had known, the man who had once done anything to please her, whose wounds she had known how to press. This Michael was different, self-contained, and impervious to her familiar tactics. "We could try again," she said finally, the words emerging more desperately than she had intended. "You and I. We could start over." Michael's gaze remained steady, not unkind, but resolute. "No, Claire. We can't." He glanced at his watch. "I have another meeting in 2 minutes. Is there anything else?" Claire stood frozen, realizing she had failed completely. The life raft she had come seeking was being politely but firmly denied. As Michael opened his office door, she gathered her composure for a dignified exit, even as her world continued to crumble around her. "I wish you well, Claire," Michael said as she passed. "I truly do." The sincerity in his voice was perhaps the most painful part of all. Claire stared at Michael, his polite dismissal hanging in the air between them. The cool detachment in his eyes was unlike anything she'd seen during their 15 years together. She had expected anger, perhaps vindictive pleasure at her predicament, or even lingering attraction she could leverage. This calm, measured man was a stranger to her. "You can't just dismiss me like this," she said, her voice taking on an edge of desperation she hadn't intended to reveal. "After everything we meant to each other." Michael closed his office door again, respecting the privacy of her distress, if nothing else. The afternoon sun cast his face in golden light while leaving hers partially shadowed, a visual metaphor for their current positions that wasn't lost on Claire. "What exactly did we mean to each other, Claire?" Michael asked quietly. "Because from where I stand now, it seems we valued very different things." Claire moved closer, her designer perfume, chosen specifically for this meeting, filling the space between them. "We built a life together. 15 years, Michael. That has to count for something." "It counted for very little when you left," he observed, his tone factual rather than accusatory. "You made it clear what you thought of me, of my work, of my potential." "I was wrong," Claire admitted, a calculated vulnerability entering her voice. She touched his arm again, more deliberately this time. "Looking at all you've built, seeing the respect you've earned, I made a terrible mistake." "David isn't half the man you are." Michael looked down at her hand on his arm, then gently stepped back, maintaining both physical and emotional distance. His wedding ring had been absent for years now, Claire noticed, while her own substantial diamond felt suddenly heavy and conspicuous. "Let me be direct," she continued, abandoning subtlety as time slipped away. "David's company is facing bankruptcy. Everything we have is tied to it. The house, our investments, our future. We could lose it all within months." A genuine tear formed in her eye, which she allowed to fall strategically. "You're the only one who can help us." "By doing what exactly?" Michael asked, his voice level. "Investing in a failing company? Licensing my technology to a competitor? Or is it something more personal you're suggesting?" Claire recognized an opening and seized it. "Both, perhaps. Business partnerships often begin with personal connections." She moved closer again, voice softening. "What we had was real, Michael. We lost our way, but seeing you again, seeing what you've become, it's made me realize what I threw away." "What you threw away," Michael repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting choice of words." Claire pressed her advantage, sensing a crack in his composure. "We could try again, not immediately, of course. There would be complications to sort out, but in time." She let the implication hang in the air between them. For a long moment, Michael was silent, studying her with an expression Claire couldn't quite read. Was he considering her proposition? weighing the business potential against their complicated history, or perhaps contemplating the satisfaction of having her return on his terms. "When you left," he finally said, "you told me I would never amount to anything significant. That I was wasting my life on pipe dreams while men like David Richardson built real success." His voice remained calm, but Claire could sense the old wounds beneath his words. "You didn't leave because we'd grown apart or fallen out of love. You left because you thought I was a failure." Claire winced at the accuracy of his assessment. "People change, Michael. I've changed. Seeing you at the wedding, watching how everyone respected you, it showed me how shallow my values were." "No," Michael said quietly. "It showed you that you bet on the wrong horse." The bluntness of his statement left Claire momentarily speechless. In the silence, Michael moved to his desk, glancing briefly at the framed photo she still couldn't see clearly. "Let me ask you something, Claire. If our situations were reversed, if David's company was thriving and mine was failing, would you be here right now?" The question hung in the air, its answer so obvious that Claire didn't attempt to fabricate one. Instead, she shifted approaches again, her desperation growing as she sensed her last opportunity slipping away. "You've always been the better person between us," she conceded. "More principled, more genuine. I admire that about you. I always did, even when I didn't show it." She blinked back genuine tears. "I'm not proud of who I've become or the choices I've made. But doesn't everyone deserve a second chance?" Michael's expression softened slightly, though not in the way Claire had hoped. There was compassion there, but not desire or manipulation. The look one might give to someone who had taken a wrong turn and ended up lost. "Second chances are earned through growth and accountability, not convenience," he said gently. "You're here because you need something from me, not because you've had some meaningful change of heart." "That's not true," Claire protested, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Isn't it?" Michael asked. "You've become everything I wanted," you said a moment ago. "But Claire, I was always this person, the same one you left. The only thing that's changed is my bank account and social status." The truth of his assessment struck Claire with unexpected force. Her carefully constructed narrative crumbled under his simple observation. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, vulnerability now genuine rather than tactical. "Everything is falling apart." Michael regarded her thoughtfully. "Start over, not with me, but with yourself. Figure out who you are without the status symbols and social positioning." He opened a drawer and removed a business card. "This financial advisor specializes in personal restructuring after business failures. She's discreet and extremely effective." Claire stared at the card he offered, reluctant to accept the finality it represented. "You've become so cold," she said, a last attempt to provoke a reaction. The Michael I knew would never turn away someone he loved who needed help. "The Michael you knew allowed himself to be devalued and manipulated," he replied without rancor. "I've grown too, Claire. I've learned that real compassion sometimes means saying no." He glanced at his watch again. "My next appointment is waiting. I meant what I said. I wish you well. I hope you find your way forward." Claire felt the last of her composure cracking. "You've become everything I wanted," she said, her final plea raw with desperation. "Don't you want me now that you could have me?" Michael's gaze was steady, his voice gentle but firm. "No, Claire. What I want is peace. What I want is authentic connections with people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide." He moved toward the door. "That was never us, even in the best of times." As he opened the door, the sounds of the busy office beyond filtered in, Phones ringing, conversations about projects and innovations, the hum of purposeful activity. Michael's world continued to expand, while hers contracted. "Goodbye, Claire," he said simply. Claire gathered her purse with shaking hands, the business card clutched between her fingers, the only thing she would leave with. As she passed Michael in the doorway, she caught a glimpse of the framed photo on his desk. Not a family picture as she had assumed, but an image of young entrepreneurs in a mentorship program Michael had founded, their faces bright with possibility. Even in photos, he had moved on to building something new, while she remained trapped in a past that no longer existed. Chapter 9. The Future. Michael stood at his office window long after Claire had departed, watching her figure grow smaller as she crossed the plaza below. Her shoulders, usually held with practiced elegance, were slumped in defeat. For a brief moment, he felt an echo of their shared history. 15 years couldn't be entirely erased, regardless of how they had ended. The compassion he felt, however, didn't equate to regret. As Claire disappeared from view, Michael released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The encounter had been inevitable, perhaps, but now it was concluded. Another chapter closed with finality. Thomas knocked lightly before entering, files in hand, for their next meeting. "Everything all right? Reception said your ex-wife was here." "Yes," Michael replied, turning from the window. Claire wanted to discuss a potential business arrangement. Thomas raised an eyebrow. With Richardson Industries circling bankruptcy, bold move on her part. "It wasn't really about business," Michael acknowledged, straightening his tie as he mentally shifted back to work mode. "But it's handled now. Let's focus on the mentorship program applications." Later that evening, in the quiet of his apartment, Michael poured himself a glass of Macallan 18, a small indulgence he allowed himself on significant days. Today qualified. He settled into his favorite chair on the terrace, tablet in hand, city lights spreading before him like earthbound stars. The financial news headline confirmed what Claire had alluded to. Richardson Industries files for Chapter 11, Bankruptcy Protection, CEO cites evolving market challenges. The accompanying article detailed David's failure to adapt to changing industry demands, precisely the shifts Michael's technology had anticipated. There was no satisfaction in the news. Business was business. David's company had faltered because of strategic missteps and inflexibility, not because of any vindictive agenda on Michael's part. The market rewarded innovation and punished stagnation with equal dispassion. Michael set the tablet aside, taking a contemplative sip of scotch. The evening breeze carried the scents of the city, mingled with the potted herbs he'd begun growing on his terrace, basil, rosemary, and thyme in terracotta planters, small signs of his expanding life beyond work. His phone illuminated with a new message. Application reviews complete. 20 finalists selected for mentorship program. Ready for your final approval. Sarah. Sarah Donovan had joined Sullivan Innovations 2 years ago, bringing operational expertise and a refreshing directness to their executive team. Her message was typically efficient, but Michael had come to recognize a warmth beneath her professional demeanor, one that had been emerging more frequently in their interactions over recent months. He opened the attached document, scrolling through profiles of young entrepreneurs selected for the company's mentorship initiative. Each applicant brought innovative ideas constrained only by lack of experience and resources, limitations. Michael remembered all too well from his own journey. The program had been his idea, a way to give promising innovators the guidance he had lacked. Thomas had initially questioned its business value, but Michael had been firm. Success means nothing if it isn't used to create opportunities for others. As he reviewed the finalists, Michael felt a sense of purpose stronger than any vindication Claire's visit might have briefly stirred. These young minds, diverse in background but united in vision and determination, represented the future he was helping to shape. He typed a response to Sarah. "Excellent selections. Would you join me for dinner tomorrow to discuss program launch details? There's a new place on Riverside I've been meaning to try." After sending the message, he realized it was the first time he'd suggested something that could be construed as social, rather than strictly professional. The thought brought a slight smile to his face, rather than anxiety, another sign of his continuing evolution. Sarah's reply came quickly. "Dinner sounds perfect. 7 o'clock? I've heard their Riverside terrace has a view almost as good as yours." The subtle personal reference, she had attended a team gathering at his apartment months ago, suggested she too recognized the shift in their dynamic. Michael found himself looking forward to tomorrow evening with genuine anticipation. He moved to the terrace railing, glass in hand, observing the city he had chosen to rebuild his life in after the divorce. From this height, traffic moved like luminous rivers, buildings stood like monuments to human ambition, and countless windows glowed with the stories of lives unfolding behind them. Somewhere out there, Claire was facing the collapse of the life she had chosen, the very outcome she had once predicted for him. Michael took no pleasure in her struggle, but neither did he feel responsible for it. They had each made choices according to their values. Those choices had led them to very different destinations. His phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Breakfast with Jennifer, his daughter, scheduled for Sunday morning. Their relationship had weathered the divorce storm, growing stronger as Jennifer matured into adulthood. Initially torn between parents, she had eventually recognized the patterns in her mother's choices. Their monthly breakfasts had become a cherished constant. Conversations ranging from her graphic design career to philosophy to his mentorship program. Michael sent her a quick text confirming their plans, adding, "Looking forward to hearing about your new project." Her response came with characteristic warmth. "Can't wait to tell you." Also bringing sketches for the mentorship program logo. "Love you, Dad." The simple closing, "Love you, Dad," filled Michael with a contentment no business success could match. Whatever mistakes he had made in his marriage, his relationship with Jennifer represented something he had done right. He took a final sip of scotch, reflecting on the day's unexpected confrontation with Claire. He had meant what he said to her. He truly did wish her well, not out of some noble forgiveness, but from the peaceful recognition that her choices no longer affected his life's trajectory. Michael gathered his empty glass and tablet, preparing to head inside. Tomorrow would bring investor meetings, program planning with Sarah, and dozens of decisions, large and small. The difference now was that each choice would be made from a position of self-knowledge and genuine purpose, not desperate striving or need for validation. As he closed the terrace door behind him, Michael caught his reflection in the window glass, a man at peace with his past and engaged with his present. The future stretched before him with possibilities he was finally ready to explore, both professionally and personally. The mentorship applications on his tablet represented his professional legacy, sharing knowledge and creating opportunities for the next generation of innovators. Sarah's dinner acceptance hinted at personal possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to consider until recently. Jennifer's Sunday breakfast promised the family connection that remained his most valued achievement. Michael moved through his apartment, turning off lights as he prepared for sleep. The space reflected his evolution, still modest in size but thoughtfully appointed. balancing functionality with touches of comfort and personality. Like the man himself, it had transformed gradually from a post-divorce way station to a true home. On his nightstand sat a small framed photo, not of past family configurations or business achievements, but of last summer's mentorship program graduates gathered around him, their faces alight with possibility. Michael touched the frame briefly before turning out the light. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and opportunities. Whatever they might be, he would face them as the man he had become, not defined by Claire's rejection or by his subsequent success, but by the quiet integrity and purpose that had guided him through both. As sleep approached, Michael's final thought was not of Claire's desperate plea or his own vindication, but of Sarah's dinner acceptance and Jennifer's Sunday visit. The future beckoned, not with the feverish promise of proving someone wrong, but with the measured joy of living according to his truest values. Sometimes failure truly was the beginning of something better. Perhaps you've reached the end of Michael and Claire's story with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The man dismissed as a failure found success not just in business, but in the far more challenging realm of self-worth. The woman who valued appearance over substance faced the consequences of her choices. Life delivered its own perfect symmetry without need for vengeful interference. But beyond this tale of betrayal and vindication lies a deeper truth I hope has resonated with you, one I've come to understand in my own journey past 60. The most profound victories in life are rarely the public ones. They happen in private moments of choice, when we decide our own worth isn't determined by others' assessments, when we choose dignity over retaliation. When we realize that success without authenticity is merely achievement, not fulfillment. Michael's true triumph wasn't becoming wealthy or watching Claire's regret. It was in that quiet moment at his office window, feeling compassion without obligation. It was in building connections based on mutual respect rather than utility. It was in creating opportunities for others rather than focusing solely on personal vindication. I wonder, have you faced similar crossroads? Perhaps someone once dismissed your dreams, questioned your worth, or walked away believing you had nothing valuable to offer. If so, you know the particular sting of that wound, how it lingers long after the initial hurt, questioning your steps even as you move forward. The temptation to prove them wrong can be powerful motivation, but it's a hollow victory if that remains our primary purpose. True healing comes not when they recognize their mistake, but when their opinion no longer defines how we see ourselves. Like Michael, many of us discover our greatest strengths later in life, when experience has taught us what truly matters. We learn that second acts often outshine first ones precisely because they're built on wisdom rather than expectation. We understand that lasting legacy comes from what we contribute, not what we accumulate. The years beyond 60 bring unique clarity if we're willing to see it. The recognition that time is both more limited and more precious than we once believed. This awareness can sharpen our choices, helping us distinguish between genuine connection and superficial association, between meaningful work and mere productivity. Michael chose to mentor young entrepreneurs, maintain his relationship with his daughter, and explore new personal possibilities with Sarah. His triumph wasn't in rejecting Claire, but in creating a life so authentic that her reappearance couldn't disrupt his hard-won peace. This, perhaps, is the quiet wisdom that comes with our years. Not that we never stumble or face rejection, but that we learn to build lives defined by our values rather than others' validations. Whatever chapter you're currently living, I hope you find the courage to define success on your own terms, to recognize your intrinsic worth beyond external markers, and to create connections that honor rather than diminish who you truly are. After all, the most beautiful futures often begin when we finally close the doors that no longer lead anywhere.